Welcome to Channel AMEC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested about migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on the little bell on the side, so once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one of getting all the insight. Now today we will shift our focus onto the business and innovation visa category by ways of explaining how the visa and the funds required to invest for whatever the project or designated investment require under 1AA B and C, and how the source of funds, regulation and policy actually requires. So what does that mean? A lot of people ask. Now, it doesn't really mean that as long as you have money, you can actually invest and get your visa. That is not quite true. Reason is that due to, well, a couple of years back, probably 10 years, the anti-money laundering law and also the anti-terrorism related regulation around the world requires the funds to be clear. Now, the definition here is not to be clear from the banks, because there's still a lot of transactions. The meaning of a clear is that the source of funds is actually legitimate. Okay, it's not coming from some source that you cannot explain. It's untaxed. It's illegal, another way, or unlawful. It might not be contravened to particular law, but it's an unexplained fund, and that's I think it should be the way to actually explain it. Anyway, let's jump into the actual law and explain further in detail. So this is generally, you will see this in the 1AAC visa, significant investor stream, or in the 1AA for the investor stream. So either it's significant or not significant. You will always get asked about this, because these funds are required to go into a managed fund approved by the government of Australia. So if it's going to be approved by the government of Australia, obviously the fund cannot be unlawful or illegal or unexplained or unclear. Okay, now unfortunately there's not much of explanation on this policy in the actual immigration webpage. I'm not too sure why, but generally it's been talking about here the fund it's only talking about how you can invest into it, but there's a little bit of information here is only saying not have history of involvement, unacceptable activity, but that doesn't explain fully and directly about the source of funds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to Legend.com, which is the dictionary of all the migration regulations. You don't get to access to this because it's subscription based. You need to pay for annual fee. It's generally for Australian migration professional will actually pay for this, because we need to check the updated law all the time. So we are looking at what are we looking at? We're looking at 22 here. It says the ownership and the source of assets for designated investment. Now you notice designated investment is the funds going into for the purpose of 1AA B and C, or compliant designated investment. Either way, it's the same. Okay, so let's have a read. And as you can see, the keyword here will not accumulate from illegal activities. Now, illegal activities generally will be, it's not from robbery, it's not from casino or gambling funds and things like that. It has to be owned by the applicant and will not borrow. It cannot be a borrow or loaned fund or mortgaged fund. Okay, it has to be 100% clear. It's all yours. No one can actually touch it. Okay, so when the case officer, now this is the key point here, because generally when you apply for 1AA visa, the case officer will come to this part. Okay, so they are scrutinizing ownership or source of fund. It's actually very important. Intend to provide degree of discretion should officer have concern that despite supporting documents of fund would not source from eligible investment or qualified business activity. So what does that mean? That means you declare you have this business or this investment, but the money is not sitting there. The money is somewhere else. Then the case officer obviously will question, so where does this money come from? Okay, so it's not sourced from illegal activity, which we have explained. Funds were not wholly owned by the applicant. So some people do provide assets that is co-owned, or co-own with your brothers and sisters. So that means the other person do have the right to access this fund. So that's not wholly owned by you. So do you have the access? Can you use this money to migrate for your purpose solely? So that's the question mark. Okay, supporting document is not genuine. What does that mean? Well, basically is the case officer will ask for your individual tax declaration or tax returns for every year to basically see how your income goes. Okay, and that calculated back into all your living costs. That's going to be minus all your living costs and how much you actually save per year and accumulate it in how many years reasonably to actually total with the sum that you're required to invest for visa purpose. Now, in assessing the ownership and source of funds used for the investments, officer may ask inquiries into a source of fund of the initial capital and the eligible investments for your business and things like that. So these are the very generic stuff, okay? But a lot of people unable to actually provide these documents. Now it's actually very vital. That's what I'm saying. It's not just you have the money, you can actually invest into Australia nowadays, and I think that applies to all the modern world. So that's the Five Eyes countries, so Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, and UK. Although some of them haven't been opened up for their business and investment visa yet. So ownership, the actual ownership of these funds must be your name. You cannot claim that this is under somebody's name, but it's actually managed by you. Yes, there are people doing this, but the ownership of that name is not you. Then that cannot be used. So again, if this raises the questions, it's actually a very usual tactic for money laundering as well, or hiding assets apart from being taxed by the government, which is not an eligible activity that you should be doing. Okay, the officer should keep in mind under policy it's not intended most of fund accumulated from qualifying business or the investment, so it can be coming from other eligible sources, but again you need to prove that these sources are clear. The fund is clear, it's actually yours. Is that going to be gifted? For example, in some countries, or most of the countries, that you can gift some of your assets to whoever you want, but some of the countries that require tax payment, for example, stamp duty required to be paid if the lump sum is above some sort of amount it required to be declared, then you will need to have the government documentation for that stamp duty payable to be shown. Okay, funds unencumbered means it's not borrowed, it's not from a third party. No third party could have access or would have the right to access to those funds. For example, if the fund is borrowed from the bank, obviously you have the money, but the bank do have the right to access to those funds or assets of you. So obviously the government of Australia cannot accept the funds that were borrowed and invested into the visa purpose. What if something goes wrong and the bank's required to get those money back? Well, obviously the bank wouldn't want to negotiate with the government of Australia to actually get the money back, because Australian government do not want this kind of diplomatic activities going on, which is wasting people's time. All right, supporting documents. What is required here? Applicants are required to indicate which asset they are likely to use for the fund. Value and ownership of the fund generally can be documented from the SALP. That is the form 1139A. And also by the end of financial year. So if it's that's going to be a cash deposit. You will like to display numbers of end of years bank statement to show the balance and how your funds or your investment portfolio have been grown over the years. The applicants are required to have the investment portfolio or career profiles declared under the statement to show how in history how you actually accumulated this fund and how legitimately you have done this over time, and that is the requirement there. Use of the fund, now that's just going into from your list of your asset portfolio. Now talking about this in ineligible funds, it's very interesting. The limit consideration fund accumulated from eligible investment or qualifying business activity, if it therefore exclude investment assets, for example property or cash acquired through mere financial windfall, including gambling. Okay, so basically that explains what I have previously said, and obviously that also including robbery and unclear funds. In some countries you do get a bag of cash. I know it's business purpose, but if it's undocumented, that means it's unclear. So where did you get the money from? Obviously you don't want to end yourself into explanation on that one there, because it's likely to fail. Inherited assets, it is open for officer to include certain inherited assets. So inherited asset also can be included, but it's only also depends on the law of that particular country where the stamp duty is payable. So you need to show the duty has been paid, a tax has been paid, and the funds under your name, and that's all the fund that you can actually utilize for whatever the purpose that you wish for, and it's clear. Anyway, today's video is all about source of funds. It's actually a very important part of 1AA visa, and it's generally, I think all the case officers will also ask those kind of questions. So my general practice, I always ask all the applicants to declare their tax paperwork for at least 3 to 5 years from the beginning of from the time of application, so you can see the history of tax payable. And obviously, why do we need to see that? Because then you can reverse calculate how much income you actually made, how much saving you actually made from your business or investment. Anyhow, should you have more question or query, more than welcome to leave a comment right down below, and I'll see you next video. Goodbye.